A stranger moves into your house while you're away, changes the locks, puts their name on the mailbox. You call the police and they tell you there's nothing they can do. It's a civil matter. Get a lawyer. It sounds impossible. But in much of America, it can take weeks, even months, and thousands of dollars to get that person out of your own home. So, how is that legal? And the scarier question, can a stranger ever actually keep your house? The answer is yes, but almost never the way the viral videos make you think. Because there are really two different fears tangled together here, and almost everyone mixes them up. One is a real, centuries-old law that can hand your property to a trespasser for good. The other is the everyday nightmare you see online. Not losing the title, just not being able to get someone out. Let's take the scary one first, the one that can actually cost you the house. It has a dry name, adverse possession. Here's the wild part. If someone uses your land out in the open long enough, the law can eventually make them the owner and erase yours. It's the flip side of a deadline. Wait too long to kick them out, and your right to sue expires. Once it does, in the eyes of the law, the land is theirs. But they can't just crash for a weekend and claim your house. The law sets a strict test. The possession has to be actual. They're really living there or using it. Open and obvious, no sneaking around. Exclusive, they're treating it as their own. Continuous and hostile. That last word fools everyone. Hostile doesn't mean angry. It just means they never had your permission. Give someone permission, and the clock never even starts. And here's what the scary headlines leave out. The time. This is not 30 days. Depending on the state, the general path takes anywhere from 5 to 30 years of open, continuous possession, and a few states offer a shortcut, a shorter path, not a longer one. If the trespasser has some paper trail suggesting ownership, even a defective deed, and pays the property taxes the whole time, some states cut the clock dramatically. California drops it to just 5 years. Miss a payment, and that shortcut is gone. They're back on the slow, decades-long track. Either way, it's a marathon, not a smash and grab. So, why does the law allow this at all? It sounds like a license to steal. It isn't. And the reason is the part almost no one knows. Adverse possession is mostly not about strangers taking houses. It's about cleaning up messy old boundaries. Picture two neighbors. For 30 years, one of them has had a fence, a driveway, or a shed sitting a few feet over the property line, usually by accident, from a bad survey nobody ever checked. Adverse possession is the tool courts use to settle that. Not a squatter stole a mansion, a garage that's been 3 feet too far to the left since the 1990s. Law professors who study it put it bluntly. The typical case isn't a homesteader. It's neighbors fighting over inches. There are two more reasons the law keeps it around. One, it rewards actually using land instead of letting it sit neglected. The old saying is that the law helps the vigilant, not those who sleep on their rights. Two, it quiets ancient, uncertain claims. After decades, forcing someone to prove a perfect chain of ownership back to the beginning of time becomes impossible. At some point, the law says, enough. Whoever's been here, using it, in the open, it's settled. And it does happen to real houses and yards. Take a Delaware case from a few years back. A man inherited a wooded lot, but for over 20 years, the neighbor next door had been using 2/3 of an acre of it as her own backyard, even keeping a goat pen back there. When he finally went to sell, he discovered the law had quietly handed that land to her. 20 years of open, obvious use. She won it. He never saw it coming. But here's the case that should calm you down. Back in 2011, a man in Texas filed a $16 legal form claiming an empty foreclosed house worth over $300,000. He moved in. The internet exploded. Man legally steals mansion for $16. Except he didn't. Months later, a judge sided with the bank, and rather than face a forced eviction, he packed up and left before dawn on his own. Filing a piece of paper does not make a house yours. The doctrine is real, but it is slow, strict, and hard to win. So that's the doctrine that can actually cost you title, rare, and it takes years. But go back to those viral videos, the furious homeowner, the stranger who won't leave, the police shrugging. Almost none of that is adverse possession at all. That's a completely different problem, and in some ways, a more maddening one. Meet the squatter. A squatter isn't trying to win your title in 20 years. They have no claim to your house at all. The problem isn't that they'll own it. The problem is getting them out. Because here's the rule that traps homeowners. In almost every state, you can't just remove them yourself. Change the locks, shut off the power, throw their stuff on the lawn, and you, the actual owner, can be the one breaking the law. Some states will fine you or let the occupant sue you. It feels backwards, but the law is terrified of landlords using force and violence to evict people, so it funnels everything through the courts. How backwards? In 2024, a woman in Queens, New York, walked into her own inherited house and changed the locks on a man who claimed but couldn't prove he had a lease. She was the one arrested for changing the locks on her own house. The occupant had been there long enough that the police treated it as a civil dispute, not a break-in. And that's the exact gap these stories live in, though this one, in the end, went her way. The charges against her didn't stick. The man was later convicted and sent to prison, and she got her house back. It just took months of exactly the ordeal these new laws were written to shortcut. Why the difference? It comes down to how long someone's been there and what they claim. A stranger caught breaking in right now is a trespasser. Police can usually just remove them. But someone who's settled in, especially if they wave around any kind of lease, real or fake, gets treated like a tenant dispute, and tenant disputes go through eviction. You've probably heard the scariest version. If they stay 30 days, they become a legal tenant, and you can never get them out. It's mostly a myth. In a few places, longer stays trigger extra process before you can remove someone. But nowhere does 30 days hand a stranger ownership of your house. It just decides which courtroom you're stuck in. So, put yourself in the homeowner's shoes. A stranger's in your house. The police won't act. Self-help could get you arrested. And eviction court is a months-long line. That fury is real. And starting in 2024, it turned into a wave of new laws. Florida moved first. In 2024, it passed a law with a simple promise: skip the slow eviction line. Now, a Florida owner can sign a sworn statement to the sheriff, swearing the person broke in, isn't a tenant, and won't leave, and the sheriff can remove them fast without a full court case. The pitch: give owners a quick tool against genuine intruders. But notice the fine print, because it matters. That fast track is only supposed to work against people with no lease at all, true intruders. If there's any real rental relationship, even an informal, spoken one, it's supposed to go back through normal eviction court. The law is trying to draw a line between a squatter and an actual tenant. Whether that line holds up in practice is exactly what the fight is about. And Florida was just the start. Within 2 years, a wave of states passed their own versions: Georgia, Texas, New York, and many more. Here's a detail that cuts against the usual story. This wasn't a red state only thing. Republican and Democratic governors alike signed these laws. In Georgia, one version passed the state house with 0 votes against it. Just be careful with the count. There's no neutral national tally, and the groups that track it disagree, so treat any this many states number as a rough and interested estimate. Now here's the crucial catch, and it ties the whole video together. These new laws speed up how fast you can remove someone. They do not touch adverse possession, the doctrine that transfers title. So, the 2 tracks stay separate. One is about getting a squatter out this month. The other is still that slow, years-long path to actually owning the land. Fixing the first did nothing to the second. So, did these laws get it right? Honest people split hard, and this video isn't here to pick a side. Both sides are staring at the same hard question. How do you remove a fake tenant fast without accidentally removing a real one? And that risk isn't just theoretical, though the details are messier than the headlines. In Missouri, in 2025, 2 brothers were wrongly forced out of the house they'd inherited after the state's fast-track law let someone else label them squatters in their own family home. They eventually got it back on a legal technicality. And separately, not because of that case, a Missouri court later threw out the entire bill that created that fast-track process, ruling that lawmakers had illegally crammed too many unrelated subjects into one law. That ruling is now on appeal, so the law's fate is still unsettled. But the wrongful removal itself is exactly the nightmare the critics warn about: a real family wrongly labeled squatters in their own home. Here's the part that almost never makes the videos. There is no reliable data showing squatting is actually on the rise. The famous crisis numbers come from a single, unpublished survey by a landlord industry group. Independent housing researchers say real data barely exists, and that in practice, it's rare. One eviction expert put it flatly. In years of legal aid work, he could barely remember a single true squatting case. So, what fueled the wave? Mostly a chain of viral videos, a few genuinely infuriating cases, a social media influencer coaching people on it, and a spike in outrage clips. The frustration behind it is real for the people it happens to. But the sense of a nationwide epidemic ran far ahead of any actual count. Supporters answer that, even if it's rare, an owner losing their home for months still needed a faster remedy. That's a fair point on its own. Just know the hard data here was thin on every side of this fight, not only the side that lost it. So, what can you actually do? Not legal advice, just the landscape. The boring stuff is your best defense. Check on empty or inherited property. Don't let it sit visibly abandoned, secure it, and know the difference between a trespasser the police can remove today and an occupant you'll have to take to court. The moment you hear it's a civil matter, you're not powerless, but you are on the clock. And circle back to that original fear, can a stranger keep your house forever? To actually take the title, they'd need years, often decades of open, continuous possession, not a month with a fake lease. The month with a fake lease version is the eviction headache. Infuriating, expensive, slow, but it ends with them removed, not with them owning your home. So, the honest answer to the title question is really two answers. Can a stranger legally own your house out from under you? Yes, but only through a slow, strict, decades-long doctrine that mostly settles boundary lines between neighbors. Can a stranger move in and make your life miserable for months? Also yes, and that's the real common problem the new laws are chasing. Which leaves the question the whole country is actually arguing about. When someone's in a home they don't own, how fast should the government be allowed to throw them out? And how sure do we need to be, first, that they're really a squatter and not a tenant? Move too slow, and you trap owners in their own nightmare. Move too fast, and you risk putting the wrong family on the street. Where that line belongs, that part, you get to decide. So, can someone move into your house and take it? Owning it takes years and almost never happens. Making your life hard for a few months is the real risk, and the law is still fighting over how to fix it without breaking something else. Either way, now you know the difference between the two, which is more than most of the internet does. Now you know